F has asked if I would proceed, and we do it with the okay of the minority. Senator Wyden as well has said we should go ahead. So I do not have an opening statement. It's my job to introduce the witnesses, and then we will go to the testimony. Our panel is a highly qualified group of witnesses. Thank you all for coming. We will hear from Dr. Ben Zeiker, the John G. Searle Chair and Resident Scholar at AEI. Dr. Zeiker specializes in energy and environmental policy while simultaneously working as a senior fellow, Pacific Research Institute. He's a former senior economist at RAND, a former adjunct professor of economics, University of California, Los Angeles, as well as the California State University Channel Islands, and is a former senior economist at Jet Propulsion Laboratory, California Institute of Technology. He has also served as senior staff economist for the President's Council of Economic Advisors, where he also specialized in energy and environmental issues. We will hear, following Dr. Zeiker, by Mr. Steve Miller, CEO of Bulk Handling Systems. Mr. Miller has 25 years of experience in the management of recycling and manufacturing facilities. Mr. Miller has led Bulk Handling Systems since 2005. Third, we will hear from Ms. Susan Kennedy, CEO of Advanced Microgrid Solutions. Ms. Kennedy has served for 2 decades in state and federal government, most recently as Chief of Staff of Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, Cabinet Secretary and Deputy Chief of Staff to Governor Gray Davis, and Communications Director for our colleague, Senator Feinstein. Last, we will hear from Honorable Karen A. Harbert, the President, Chief Executive Officer of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Institute for 21st Century Energy. Ms. Harbert leads the Institute's effort to build support for energy action nationally and internationally through policy development, education, and advocacy. Ms. Harbert is the former Assistant Secretary for Policy and International Affairs at the U.S. Department of Energy. So the committee thanks you all for making time from your busy schedules to be in attendance today. And I should ask Senator Wyden for his opening statement. As you can see, Senator Hatch asked me to proceed while he's on his way, I guess.
Well, I'm looking forward, as always, to working with you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate it. In my view, there are 2 parts to the energy debate today. The first is where energy policy needs to go in the long term. And I want it understood that I think it is time to take the energy provisions in the tax code and throw them in the trash can. It is a mishmash, a crazy quilt of distorted incentives, and I think what we ought to be doing is substituting a very different approach, a tech-neutral approach that cuts the cost of these energy subsidies in half and promotes a clean energy economy. I call it more green for less green. The second part of the energy debate is about creating the running room in the short term to make it possible to achieve that long-term goal that I just described. And I'm going to talk about both today, and we'll start with the short term. At the end of last year, Democrats and Republicans came together and began to move away from the same old cycle of energy tax extenders. Congress decided on a bipartisan basis that another weeks or months-long renewal of the energy tax incentives, the renewable energy tax incentives, wasn't good enough. Incentives for wind and solar, which have grown to become major parts of America's energy portfolio, got 5 years of certainty and other clean technologies got to. The result has been dramatic. New solar installations are projected to double this year, and for the first time, new solar generation will exceed natural gas. Now, in the short term, it's important to remember that there's leftover business that needs to be addressed. Certain renewable technologies were left out of last year's package: fuel cells, geothermal, and more. The clock is ticking down to another round of expirations at the end of this year. For example, bipartisan legislation on waste heat to energy that passed this committee was left out. The sooner Democrats and Republicans come together, take care of these energy extenders, and clear the decks, the sooner it will be possible to find a smarter, fresher approach to long-term energy policy. So let me just wrap up with a few more quick comments about the long-term part of this debate. In my view, the key to a long-term sustainable approach on energy policy is going to technology neutral. The system on the books today distorts energy markets, picks winners and losers, and especially holds back America's innovators. That ought to change, and that's why I put forward a tech-neutral plan that will be radically simpler and more efficient. Gone, as I indicated, will be today's Byzantine web of 44 separate energy tax breaks. In their place will be 3 long-term incentives built around clear goals: cleaner energy, cleaner transportation, and energy efficiency. And most important, and I especially appreciate so many of my colleagues being here from the other side of the aisle, both here and in the Energy Committee, and I think some of my colleagues know I chaired the Energy Committee for a period of time. I've heard constant refrains about cutting subsidies. It's time to cut subsidies. We all ought to agree on cutting subsidies. So what my proposal does is it cuts the amount of subsidies, $125 billion every decade, in half. It is a market-oriented system that, in my view, is going to unleash the innovators with big ideas. Now, the Finance Committee is lucky to be joined today by the heads of 2 companies that are doing exciting work in the field of renewable energy. We're very pleased that Bulk Handling Systems is here. They're based in Eugene, Oregon. The waste Americans produce every day can be recycled and turned into energy. Even the trash trucks run on renewable fuel. Advanced Microgrid Solutions is at the forefront of a technology that has long been overlooked by our tax policies, and that is energy storage. I began years and years ago to offer various energy storage proposals, because the fact is the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. So energy storage is a must. And in summary, these are the kind of 21st century innovations that right now are disadvantaged by outdated policies, or in my view, just get ignored altogether. But with a tech-neutral policy, the unfair market distortions go away, the incentives will be predictable, and the goals will be clear. The cleaner your energy, the cleaner your transportation fuel, the more efficient your home or office building, the larger the tax break. That goes for everyone. I've had some questions about colleagues who are concerned about the implications for fossil fuels. This applies to everyone. A natural gas facility that invests in a highly efficient next-gen turbine, or an oil company that sets out to make the clean transportation fuels of the future, also qualifies for this fresh approach that I am describing. The bottom line is that energy in America is being transformed. The threat posed by climate change grows every day. New technologies are being developed. Investors see enormous economic opportunity in renewable energy. So it's time to play some catch-up ball and ensure that the energy tax policies, these outdated energy tax policies, keep up. It's time to stop clinging to yesteryear like the naysayers who saw the first automobiles hit the road a century ago and said, hey, the horse is here to stay. What's needed is policies to support those who are at the forefront and the innovators. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses. Very glad to hear that Eugene, Oregon is out in force at the witness table, and look forward to their ideas on how to address both concerns, a smart, fresh energy approach for our long term, and dealing with these crucial tax extenders, which in effect give you a bridge to get to the long term. Mr. Chairman, it sounds like you have gotten through the early morning of your day, and look forward to working with you on it.
Well, thank you. Same here. Well, this isn't the first hearing we've had on these issues during my time on the Finance Committee, nor is it likely to be the last. Members on both sides of the aisle have a keen interest in this area, and for good reason. The energy-related provisions in our tax code impact a variety of industries throughout our economy and affect the lives and livelihood of the majority of all of our constituents. It is therefore important that we continually examine these provisions to make sure we're getting things right and that resources do not go to waste. I'm really pleased that Senator Grassley opened this hearing for me since I was detained. I'll start today's discussions by reiterating my overall position. Generally speaking, when it comes to energy policy, I've always said that we need an all-of-the-above approach. Unfortunately, not everyone shares this view. For example, leaders in the current administration, including President Obama himself, have said that they are for an all-of-the-above approach, yet clearly when it's time to draft policies, the administration seems far more interested in punishing the production and use of fossil fuels, even if it means higher energy costs for our hardworking taxpayers. We see this across the board in the administration's environmental policies, its regulatory war on coal, its refusal to allow construction of the Keystone Pipeline, and in what is more relevant to today's discussion, tax policy proposals which consistently include higher taxes at virtually all steps of the energy supply chain. Whether it's an increased per barrel tax on oil production or higher per gallon taxes charged on gasoline at the pump, the Obama administration seems intent on raising the cost of producing or consuming energy from fossil fuels, even if it means increased hardships on middle-class and lower-income families. More recently, the president proposed a $10 per barrel tax on oil, an idea that virtually all economists agree would directly result in higher energy prices for families and consumers. Of course, this proposal would also be harmful to American businesses, particularly those in the manufacturing sector that rely on fossil fuels. The president and those that serve in his administration presumably know that this is the case, yet they are undeterred, and quite frankly, these proposals are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the president's efforts, not to mention those of many of his supporters here in Congress, to use the tax code to further an ideological attack on American energy producers. This is, of course, not a surprise. After all, back when he was a candidate for president, then Senator Obama said in so many words that the centerpiece of his energy policy, the so-called cap-and-trade proposal, would, quote, necessarily, unquote, cause energy prices to, quote, skyrocket, unquote. And the president's first energy secretary, before he was appointed, argued on the record in favor of purposefully raising gas prices to European levels. All of this is meant to serve an agenda focused on ideology and not on the day-to-day needs of the American people, and is quite simply the opposite of what our country needs. Instead of discouraging the domestic production of oil and gas, we should welcome it. By reducing our dependence on foreign oil, creating many high-paying jobs, and bringing down the cost of living for U.S. households, increased domestic energy production can protect our national security and provide greater economic stability. The president's first major attempt to overhaul America's energy policy, the aforementioned cap-and-trade proposal, thankfully failed to pass through Congress, even when the Democrats controlled the House and had a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. Since then, proponents of this horribly misguided policy have tried to repackage cap-and-trade, instead calling it a, quote, carbon tax, unquote. As an aside, I have to say that when it comes to these, quote, carbon tax, unquote, proposals, I'm a little disappointed in my friends on the other side of the aisle. Typically, when they have a proposal they know is going to put the financial screws to the American people, they give it a more clever name. The so-called Affordable Care Act comes most immediately to mind. However, with the various, quote, carbon tax, unquote, proposals, my friends are telling the American people exactly what they'll be getting: higher taxes in the form of increased energy costs and reduced wages relative to the cost of living. In addition to increasing costs, particularly on middle-class and lower-income earners, the President's energy tax policy also seems hyper-focused on picking winners and losers and handing over taxpayer resources to unproven ideas and technologies that far too often are completely unable to compete in the energy marketplace. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for promoting innovation and advancing alternative energy sources. Like I said, I want an all-of-the-above approach. However, I do not believe we should be purposefully raising the cost of existing and proven energy sources and adding to the cost of doing business or raising a family in the U.S. in order to make alternative energy sources more attractive. In addition, I have serious concerns about the way in which the administration has overseen the use of the subsidies it designed to promote alternative energy. Most notably, as chairman, I am currently investigating the administration of cash grants awarded under the Section 1603 program and energy tax credits based on evidence from the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration and elsewhere that suggest possible misuse. So far, $25 billion has been awarded under the cash grant program since it was established in the so-called stimulus that passed in 2009. We need to know more about where those resources have gone. Ultimately, the energy-related provisions in our tax code, like everything else, will have to be reconsidered as part of our ongoing tax reform efforts. In our attempts to make the tax code fairer, simpler, and more conducive to economic growth, I'm willing to consider any reasonable alternatives. However, that is a long-term effort that will likely not bear fruit in the immediate future. In the meantime, I think we need to work to ensure that our tax code is designed so that it does not punish the production of any viable energy source. In the end, it is easy for politicians in Washington to sit in an ivory tower and say the people aren't currently paying enough for their energy and they should pay more in order to further some ideological agenda. However, I think the vast majority of American workers and families would strongly disagree with that notion. As always with these energy hearings, I expect that we'll have a spirited discussion of all these issues here today. I think we've assembled a very good panel of witnesses to represent various viewpoints, and I look forward to hearing their views on these and other matters. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Miller.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Hatch, Ranking Member Wyden, rest of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here today. My company is actually a group of 4 companies with operations based in Eugene, Oregon, but manufacturing operations in Oregon, Tennessee, and California. Together, our companies design, engineer, manufacture, and install systems that process municipal solid waste streams, extracting the value from what is thrown away and minimizing the amount that's sent to landfills. While our products are produced here in the United States and most of our business is domestic, we also operate globally and today are fulfilling orders on 5 continents. One of our companies is focused on anaerobic digestion, or AD technology. In this group, we build systems that convert organic waste into biogas, which is then used to produce either electricity or transportation fuel that would replace diesel in a waste truck fleet. In each of the systems, the resulting material after biogas is extracted are solids, which we then turn into compost, and that material is then used in the agricultural sector to replenish soils and retain water. So while I'm here today to talk about anaerobic digestion, biomass, and tax credits that might be available, our systems do much more than simply produce renewable energy. They substantially increase diversion of material from landfills. They manage the production of methane from the breakdown of organic waste so that it's not released to the atmosphere. We produce a baseload electricity as well as transportation fuels, and we produce organic compost to both replenish soils and retain water. Despite the overall attractiveness of the products that we create, our development has been slowed due to the headwinds caused by pricing, low prices for electricity, low prices for natural gas, and low prices for oil. Since the renewable products that we produce compete with these fuels, we're challenged to provide our customers the economics that they need to fund projects. So that really brings me to my central point. And while I appreciate the Senate's attentiveness to this issue and the policies that were adopted at the end of 2015, they simply don't do enough as it relates to the biomass sector. And to correct this, we really need two simple things. First and foremost is certainty of the credit, and secondly is parity with other renewable energy technologies so that we can attract the financing needed for these projects. The way the current credit is structured, we don't achieve either of the outcomes. The PTC and ITC for wind and solar received long-term extensions, while credits for the biomass industry were extended only to the end of 2016 and only applied to the renewable energy portion of the project. Since development of these projects takes several years, this makes the credit limited and really today of not much value. Additionally, all of our systems are required to deal with the solid material and produce compost. Thus, the cost to build an AD system must necessarily also include the compost system capacity. I think the intention of the credit is to provide value across the whole project, but the way it's now structured, it doesn't do so. To make it useful, it needs to include all of the necessary elements of a renewable energy system. So while the credit established for the biomass industry expires at the end of this year, the credit for wind and solar were extended for 5 years. This is on top of the many years that they've received these benefits. To develop our project and our process, we simply need that ramp-up time, and I would suggest that if Congress wants to support renewable energy in the biomass sector, these advantages should be removed. So in conclusion, I would ask you to consider the following. First, ensure parity across all renewable energy technologies. If wind and solar are given credits, then these should similarly apply to the biomass sector. Second, extend the PTC for biogas technologies for 5 years with no phase-out, and ensure that the legislation allows technologies to convert the PTC into an ITC. Third, allow biogas to be used as a transportation fuel to obtain these credits, similar to if we were producing electricity. And lastly, allow the credit to apply the cost to develop the compost portion of the project so that we can use it in the entirety of the project. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak today, and I hope you can help us develop this important industry.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Well, thank you, Senator Wyden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to start with you, Mr. Miller, and you, Ms. Kennedy, because I think it's striking. You all actually run companies. You are innovators, and I think it's particularly important as Congress moves to what is the perpetual ritual of energy policy. We wait until the last minute. There is this song and dance of tax, extenders, and there are more than a dozen of them that are going to expire in December. And it's estimated that the federal government is going to spend more than $125 billion over the next 3 decades on these provisions. So I continually hear from business people that this just defies common sense because they don't have certainty and predictability. So what I have proposed, and more than 30 United States senators are now on board on this, I've said enough already. Let's just throw the tax provisions, or the energy tax provisions, in the trash can. There are more than 44 of them, and substitute the 44 for 3, for essentially clean power, clean transportation fuel, and energy efficiency. And it comes in at half the cost. I call it more green for less green. And my question to you is, would something like this be preferable to what we have? Because we get out of the business of picking winners and losers, neutral between clean energy technologies, and best of all, cut the costs in half. Ms. Hall, Ms. Kennedy, would this be better for you?
Take that?
You guys are like the Senate, you yield to each other.
It would be, and really the key for us is certainty of the credit. In our case, each of the projects are financed independently, and so we need to really look at the economics of each thing independent of any other activity. And if we know those credits are going to be there, we can rely upon them, then we can fund them. And it's really that simple. I'll add the point that because in this particular case we're looking at an investment tax credit, we only will be able to benefit from it if we're earning income and paying taxes. So that's the simple truth of it, is that there's no negative associated with it. If we don't build the project, well, then there's no tax credit and there are no taxes for anybody. And so if this inspires or makes the economics work for a project, well, then it seems to me it's a plus all the way around.
Ms. Kennedy.
I agree. It would be beneficial to have a consistent across-the-board clean energy tax policy that was technology neutral and attracted investment for advanced technologies. The danger is that if it's drafted in a way that assumes you know what those advanced technologies are today, then in 2 years it may not be suitable. And it may not attract the kind of investment in technologies that are not commercially ready today, but they could be in 2 years.
You raise an important point. The value of what has been proposed is Congress finally gets out of picking winners and losers. Congress will not be in the business of, in effect, saying, oh, this technology sounds like a winner, and that really is because Senator so-and-so is powerful and Senator so-and-so is not powerful. I mean, it basically says we're going to be tech neutral, and we're just going to have 3 priorities: clean energy, clean transportation fuels, and energy efficiency. So I appreciate your bringing it up, because getting away from picking winners and losers is the prerequisite to having a technology neutral policy. Now, one question for you, Mr. Miller, since we're so pleased about what you all are doing in Eugene. Talk a little bit about the cost of uncertainty. You know, what I'm struck by when I'm home, and I was home for a big chunk of the last few weeks, business people tell me, you know, if you get out of picking winners and losers and just give me some certainty, I will go away happy. You know, then you all have the debate about rates and all the rest. But what are the costs of uncertainty, given the groundbreaking work that you're doing, the innovation you've achieved? Let me just wrap up by having you lay out the cost of uncertainty.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And obviously, it's for us, it means that nothing really happens. So if we can't see what's going on in the future, we just can't get the finance needed for these projects. By way of example, we built about 1.5 years ago a system that takes municipal solid waste and produces a transportation fuel, very low carbon, actually a negative carbon fuel that's used by a waste truck fleet. It's the first one in the world. And so that innovation just wouldn't occur unless we knew that we could line up all of the resources needed to bring that project to bear. So
I'm over my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Grassley.